It's very nice to be back at EPFL. Thank you, Cyril, again for having us and for supporting not just the work that we're doing here at the exhibition, but also through the Biennale and the publication as well. I have very fond memories from, I can't believe it was 8 years ago, but that was a fun exhibition to work on, and it's really nice to be back. It's also nice to be among so many friends, and I thank you all for turning out. I think half the audience are people that we know, and maybe a third of them are going to end up in these slides here. But I also want to thank my wife Erica for accompanying me on this journey, not just to Lausanne, but also throughout our practice. I want to start off, even this is an image that Ariel has taken, but it's one of my favorites. It shows our studio. The space behind the camera is 1/4 of this total space that we have, which is a small atelier. It's the place where people sit and work on laptops and things like that. But 3/4 of it is actually workshop. We're in the process of renovating, so that equation is going to change a little bit. We've got a few more seats now, but what I really like about it is this is the atmosphere that we conduct our practice in. There's a lathe machine on the left. Anna Julia is there sitting in one of our folding chairs. Ami's behind her making a model. This was the sort of chaos in preparation for the Biennale. But it really speaks to the kind of environment we have. It's in the midst of an industrial complex in Mumbai, not far from the airport. And it's the process and the practice of making has been something that's been really critical for the work that we've done. Having said that, we also have the joy of working with unbelievable artisans, craftsmen, some in carpentry. You can see here where a sketch goes, I can make a sketch, send a WhatsApp. A couple days later, a full-scale teakwood mock-up comes back. 3 days later, a machinist will bring it back and it's in brass. And so to be able to, Erica and I grew up not far from Detroit, which has this amazing tradition of making. I grew up in my grandfather's workshops. We always made things. Los Angeles, the same thing. I've never been to a place like Mumbai that has the kind of Bollywood is there, the most current cutting-edge technology is there, but at the same time, we can still make the way things were made 3,000 years ago. You can build with lime, a stone wall made of stone, timber joinery like you wouldn't believe. And these artisans and craftsmen that exist in the thousands are there and available to really collaborate with, and we rely heavily on their expertise and their knowledge. It's not us giving a final finished drawing. It's through dialogue and collaboration that a lot of these things come about. As Cyril mentioned, we also, through our passion for making, we've developed a lot of objects, furniture, lights. A lot of these started out as sketches, as whims, things we wanted to make just because we were interested in them. The folding chair that you can see in the bottom left and on the top is something that's come out of a project. We were doing a small cafe. We had to fit 10 chairs in this much space, so they could only be 38 millimeters each. So it's just something that, again, because we have the luxury of working with these kinds of artisans, we get to enjoy this part of the process. This is an example, and again, we're very much in the workshop with them. This is somebody that I've worked with for 13 years now. I think he was 15 years old when he started. He has not as much gray hair as I do, but not far behind. But it's really nice, it's solid marble on the right, wooden peg, the kind of joinery that you can practice and work with is incredible. Again, exploration of materials. This is recycled glass, comes from gin and whiskey and wine bottles. This is a table, you can see them downstairs. It's something we developed. We didn't invent it, but again, we work with the artisans. We make a lot of samples. What's the right ratio? What's the right mixture? Color, texture. This is Ariel's kitchen on the right. He was a bit of a guinea pig for us, but on the left you can see this is the workshop of one of our metalsmiths. He works a lot in brass. It's funny because the chandelier that's shown there, this one was actually CNC wire cut when we finally got to production, but the image on the left had to be made with cut tubes. So it's a sort of, the idea with the light is that there's one illuminated tube in the center and the rest around it are just standard fluorescent glass tubes, but they're not lit. So once the bulb in the middle burns out, you can rotate it with all the others. So in theory, the fitting works for 20, 25 years. But what we established was, I made a cardboard mock-up, I made a sample, I went to get it 3D printed, and the cost of 3D printing it in plastic was more than twice the cost of getting somebody to machine it and silver solder solid brass by hand. And so, again, for me, I would rather spend the time in the workshop communicating and having a dialogue with these artisans than I would sitting in front of a rhino model. And so, again, we look at different things at different scales when they go into production. These are the chairs. Again, just sort of a very simple folding chair. There's a version with leather, a version that's all in timber. They're handmade. Every single back is a solid piece of wood that's initially very crudely kind of carved out, but then they have tools and jigs and they're very neatly refined. Cyril, on our trip to Hetta outside of Dubai, again, we work a lot through models, mock-ups, samples. So we took a model that we'd made. This was a house that was planned to be made in rammed earth. And we took it there thinking that it would be constructed in one particular way. And when we met the people that would actually be helping us with the construction, they said, no, actually you can build it a different way. And they started to construct a model of the house themselves at scale in the mud. And so they were demonstrating how cob was made. We were thinking rammed earth. They said, no, if you do it in cob. They were from a part of Afghanistan and they had immigrated because it was near the border of Oman. And so, again, relying on local tacit knowledge to inform and evolve the process. This is another example. So that's me on the bottom left, my blue jeans. One of the carpenters I've worked with for 13 years now, Punaram. He's there and we're debating the merits of sliding door systems and what the details are. But this is a full-scale drawing of the section of the window frame that he has made. The white lines are with masking tape. He's drafted it. He's worked out the details. How does water stay out? How does the wood expand and contract? How do you keep dust, air, all those things out? And then we have a conversation about it. So again, it evolves. It starts as a sketch. It's a dialogue. And it goes from there. The image on the right is Malakar Mama with the pen. He's an old, sort of a jack of all trades, an all-rounder, as they would say, in India. And he's having a conversation with a very business-oriented project manager who avoids coming to site at all costs. So he used Anand, the gentleman on the right, was a project manager, and they're discussing the construction of the well at Avsara. And so, again, it's this is how the design evolves. There's not a set of technical drawings for how this thing is to be made. It evolves through these conversations. Again, samples. These are some samples that Milena made with Dwani from my team, who's not here, but looking at pigmented cement plaster. This was for a project we were doing in Mumbai. We do a lot of interiors as well, which are really nice as a way to explore materials. We can make custom door handles, locks, latches, hinges, furniture, whatever it is. And so, again, we try and leave the framework of the idea loose enough that we can bring in collaborators and allow them to sort of exercise their craft and their expertise, again, through dialogue, but also in a way that allows us to make decisions about materials, about texture, about color, things that are very hard to imagine when the thing is either a model only or a drawing only. And so once we have the appropriate context, the the atmosphere, the spatial condition, the way that light enters a room, then we can make those samples in the space, in situ, and really look at them. Again, mock-ups, this was for the school. The entire school is made from reclaimed, or all the doors and windows are reclaimed, or at least the wooden ones are. And we found very early, the headmaster for the school said we need small lockers or cubbies for the students. He wanted to buy furniture and place it in front of the wall. And we realized very quickly that the cost of that furniture to be made in plywood was more expensive than building it out of 40 millimeter thick marble. So we integrated the marble into the thickness of the wall. This was a sample of how it would all work with the door and the column and the frame. But again, leaving the construction, the methodology ambiguous enough to be able to make these decisions in the process is something that we have really enjoyed working. We make a lot of things, so this is back to our workshop. This is Devilal, one of the carpenters that's really embedded in our team. This is the model that you'll see downstairs in the exhibition. And I show the building blocks there on the top left, which is one of our case goods pieces, but it's also something that's evolved, again, as a tool that we've made for ourselves. They're small, solid brass increments. I'm from the US, so I'm sorry they're in inches, but they're all 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch, or half by 1 by 2. And so they're really useful we use them for bookbinding, we use them for model making, but they're tools that have evolved as a part of our process, and they're incredibly useful. And now the carpenters have sort of integrated them into their process as well. This is now starting to get a little bit into the school, but I really like the image, especially the one in the middle. So on the left is the architecture version of it as we make these bamboo screens, as we imagine them at scale with basswood sticks. The image in the middle is the same person who was drawing the well, Malakar Mama. He's testing it out on the facade of his home. So he's made them in his small village, and he's putting them in front of his own windows so that he can understand the process. And then the image on the right is as they're installed in school. This is him again tying the knots. As I said, he's an all-rounder. So he's built 150 wells. He knows how to make cement plaster. He knows how to do carpentry. He's worked with bamboo extensively. He has just this incredible knowledge that he's now passing down to his son, who's also we work with in building. So the image on the left, some of you might recognize. This is the steps to the Acropolis by Pikiones in Greece. And for me, what one is I just love the image, and I love the paving and the details. I took this image to Rameshwar, the mason who's worked with us on the school, and I said, how do we get this quality? How do we get this character for no money? We can't spend, the budget calls for gravel, that's what we have. So he said, let's get waste material, let's get scrap stone, we'll go to quarries, we'll go to shops, we'll take their offcuts, we'll take their broken pieces, whatever it is, and then we can arrange those in a way that's haphazard, seemingly haphazard, but that each artisan, each person working on it, that they themselves engage with that material. And so the film that we have downstairs, he speaks very beautifully, better than I can, but he speaks about sort of entrusting them and believing in them and really trying to inspire them to make something that is better than what they could have imagined. And so to really rely on them, there's no drawing for this. There's no drawing for this pavement. It was this photograph shown to him on my phone, sent it to him on WhatsApp. We have a conversation at site with the materials. We lay them out. We say, okay, is this working? And then from there, they just go, and it sort of proliferates the campus. This is the same. So the same steps that the girls were sitting on. So in this image, they're facing this opening in a dance class, and here they're looking through that pavement. But this is not something that I could have drawn. I know Picciones has these amazing drawings where he's drawn them, but for us, the joy and the pleasure of this is working with people who, it's not that they inherently get it, it's not that it's easy or that it's right away, but through sort of overcoming the initial trust deficit that I think a lot of architects and builders inherently have, we can really, really engage with them and produce these things that are better than the sum of our parts. So this is the school. This is Avsara. It's a leadership academy for young women in India. It's founded by Rupa Purushottaman, who's a friend of ours, Erica and I. And she's been working on this for, I guess, 13 years now. She was working on it for 8 to 10 years before we became heavily involved. And it's a school for young women specifically. It's residential. And she has, the focus is towards leadership and social entrepreneurialism. And so she's worked with her husband, Joseph, who's the headmaster of the school. They've developed the curriculum. They've done the fundraising. They've really created this thing completely from scratch. So again, when we started, there was very, very little budget. It was $40 a square foot, which is about 400 francs per square meter, was the budget from the foundations to the furniture. Everything, light fittings, transformer for the site, landscaping, tables, chairs, paint, everything. And so we really, really had to be extremely thoughtful. A huge part of the design was just managing the bill of quantities. And so again, that's where the example of taking the waste material, using that. We also knew that the cost was not just the upfront cost of the construction, but also the long-term maintenance. And so we worked with Transolar climate engineers who have offices in Frankfurt. We worked with an engineer named Pratik, who's based in New York. And we developed this system, or they really developed this system, we collaborated, of solar chimneys, which you can see here. So in the center of every building, there are a series of these vertical shafts that exit out at the roof level here. And the idea is that on this face, which is here, that on 3 sides facing south, east and west, there's basically a greenhouse. The light from the sun heats up the vertical concrete slab that's here in the section, and that creates a convection. So that convection draws air out of the ceiling level of every room. So these upper floors are dormitories. The lower floors here are classrooms, and then on this side is an open veranda. And so at the ceiling level, you have these vents, these grills, and that air gets sucked out of the roof. At the same time, underneath the buildings, we have these massive earth ducts. And these are basically concrete hume pipes that face to the north side. And what we do is we plant heavy vegetation in front of most of them, which creates a little bit of humidity. It's quite a dry climate. And so a little bit of humidity, the air passing underneath the building, which more or less stays at a constant temperature, cools each of these spaces between 5 and 10 degrees, depending on the season and the number of people using it. But it's been very, very effective. Part of that system, part of what that system relies on, we really had to look at the school holistically. So part of what that relies on is the thermal mass of the floor and the thermal mass of the ceiling. So we made the decision very early on, again, partly because of budget. We didn't want any plaster, we didn't want any false ceiling, and we wanted incredibly durable floors. So again, these are craftsmen. We took the broken pieces. This is all marble. It comes from different parts of Rajasthan based on, often the name of the marble is the city that it comes from. I once made the mistake of asking him where Hassan Green came from, and he just looked at me sideways. It comes from Hassan. I mean, who would ask such a silly question? But what we found again was that if we could get the material for nearly no money, effectively the cost of transport, then we could invest more in the artisans and the craftsmen who are making it. I understand there's a different labor equation in Switzerland and the US than there is in India, but we found that if we could save on the materials, then there was a net savings by spending more on the labor and the care and the attention that went into it. And so you get these very beautiful floors. They're all color-coded. We worked with my team. We worked with Milena as well. And then again, to go with that, we worked on the ceilings. This was something that Milena and I had collaborated while I was with Studio Mumbai. We kind of kept in touch, followed each other on Instagram. And one day, I think you sent me an email, said, how's it going? What's going on? We should Skype. I think within a day or two of that Skype call, you had a ticket. And Milena showed up and effectively, I had no idea what to expect in terms of how the collaboration would go or how we would go about it. But Milena came up with the entire idea of coloring the ceilings. Again, there's no false ceiling because we need the thermal mass to be exposed. And so the whole idea of it, leaving the walls, we already had the mosaic floors, but to color the ceilings, which you experience not just when you're in the space looking out and how it relates to the landscape, but also when you're in the landscape looking up, you see the slabs because almost everywhere around the building is an open veranda. So you either see it through the glass of the classrooms, but for the most part, even in the classroom level, there's a lot of exposed verandas. So how these buildings are experienced from inside looking out, but also from outside looking in. The landscape was also something that was very important for us. So this is the campus plan. You arrive from here. This was the first building that was constructed. We knew that this would be the first time living away from home for most of these young women. And so we made the very conscious decision to have a greater number of smaller buildings. Originally it was planned, or the suggestion from Rupa was, let's have a building and everybody's housed, or one or two buildings, the dorms are over here, the classrooms are over there. But we really wanted to create a campus atmosphere. The goal in educating these young women, especially through the high school level, is that they obviously aspire to go on to university. And so to begin to develop that kind of atmosphere on the campus, the word she kept using was sanctuary. She wanted to create a sanctuary for learning. And so the other thing that we did was to have all of the buildings. Typically in India, what they do is they'll have the academic in one part and they'll have the residential in another part. But for us, the idea of, we didn't want dormant parts of the campus where activity would be one place during the day and another place at night. It seems like a place where people could get into trouble. We wanted sort of constant activity sort of throughout. And so all the buildings on the lower level have academic functions. This is the library. This is the leadership center. This is entrepreneurialism, Indian studies, science and technology. And this has the cafeteria and then classrooms above. And then the top two floors are the dorms. And so right now, about 50% of the students are staying there. The goal eventually is to get to about 70%. And part of that is that they have so much, there are so many functions above the academic curriculum that they want to try and include as a part of the entire experience. I wanted to point out here, so this is our architectural drawing of it. There's a much nicer drawing of it downstairs, which I hope you'll all see. We just had it embroidered on a piece of sort of a 2.5 meter piece of cloth. And for me, the softness that brings was a really enlightening experience. I highly recommend having some of your plans stitched if you ever have the time or find the time. Again, one of the other things we created was this network of waterways that irrigate the campus. And so the entire school is on a reed bed filtration system. So the black and the gray water go to reed beds, which there is one here, there are two here, and there's one here. And so what happens is that you wash your hands, you take a shower, you flush the toilet, that water goes to these reed beds. They take the first level of toxins out of it, and it's alocasia and reeds and cannas, things like that help clean the water. That then goes through a secondary filter and comes to the polishing pond, which is here, which then further has fish and other plants in it as well, and gets UV filtered, and then that gets pumped up. The campus is on a very steep slope, well, a fairly steep slope, not by Swiss standards, I suppose. But there's an 18-meter drop from this corner to this corner. So that's helped us, one, with the collection of water. There's a lot of water harvest. All the buildings have water harvesting tanks underneath them. And once it's then filtered, it goes back into these channels, and these are what's used to irrigate the site. So the entire landscape doesn't use any drop of water from outside of the campus. Everything for the landscape is generated by the water that literally goes down the drains. And so it's reused, recycled. We've worked with a landscape architect named Hemali, who's based in Mumbai. We've worked with permaculturalists from Zanzibar, who I'll introduce in the next project. But they've come and taught workshops. So a big part of this as well has been trying to gather interesting and interested people to come in and sort of breathe life into the campus. So continuing on that theme of landscape, this is a project that we're doing in Zanzibar. It's a small eco-resort. It's for two friends who are from the Middle East, but they're based now in the US. And they've had this land for about 15 years. They're now looking at developing it. They wanted to create homes for themselves, but they realized very quickly that they would not be able to use it for more than a month or two out of the year. And so they wanted to create something where they could go with they both have large extended families. They both want to come with a lot of friends. There's ideas for cooking classes and music festivals and yoga retreats and things like that. So they wanted to create a sort of community of guest houses. The beauty and the problem with the site is that the entire thing is coral rock. So all of these plants that you're seeing, this was before we started anything, but all of these plants that you're seeing are growing literally on stone. This is coral limestone, which the entire island is made of. It's the cheapest building material. So this is, if I take 5 big steps backwards from where I'm standing in this photo, I fall off this 5-meter cliff. The water level at high tide comes to about here. And you can see the sea has eroded underneath, and then this is cantilevered. This is the water also at low tide, but it has these unbelievable colors. So this is seaweed and sea urchins and all kinds of, there's octopi in here, all kinds of starfish and things like that. But at high tide, the water comes up to here. Milena, Ariel, and I were there last week, and Milena's entire day was geared around the timing of the tides. We would know if Milena wasn't there at 4:15, it must be high tide because she would be swimming. At high tide, you can jump off this cliff and into the water. But it creates a very, very, as green as this is, this is completely untouched and hasn't been for probably 50 years. So nothing grows much more than this. These are very, very hardy but kind of scraggly plants. So we started working with, this is the client Shehab here on the left. This is Franco, who is an incredibly enthusiastic permaculturalist who's from East Germany. He escaped from East Germany before the wall came down. He's trained as a chef. But he is now a permaculturalist, and he and his partner, his wife, Bernadette, have started this school. This is their school. It's the Practical Permacultural Institute of East Africa. We were very inspired to find, this is literally an hour after having met him. He took us to his school. This is his reed bed filtration for the septic there. And one of the first things we had to do on the site was build a nursery, right? We literally have to if we want to have soil, we have to grow the soil. So he talks about you have to have chickens, because the chickens will take the kitchen waste and then they'll scratch the compost and they'll break it up, and then they'll take a shit and that puts nitrogen into the soil and that creates compost, and you just have this whole ecosystem. The idea of chop and drop, so you grow plants that are going to come up very quickly. You don't need them to be there long, but they provide shade for the trees. You know, a mango tree takes a long time to grow, so it needs to be shaded. So you have these trees that are sort of sacrificial, or plants like bananas that come up very quickly. You cut them, lay them down, that becomes mulch, and then new ones come up. And so from the sort of barren rock, we very quickly, not very quickly, but over the course of a year, have cultivated this landscape without bringing, it's illegal to shift soil in Zanzibar. Doesn't mean it's not done, but we've tried to minimize it as best we can. But for the most part, we've generated the soil by growing things that could survive in that environment. This is, Ariel has a very beautiful one of, from the Ganga Maki studio as well, but this is the chicken house that Franco's very proud of as well. He smuggled special eggs back from India when he came to visit us. And conceptually, we've worked with a good friend of mine who's a landscape architect in New Zealand, Andy Hamilton. He was practicing in London. He and I worked on a house in Kerala together while he was working for somebody and I was at Studio Mumbai. So he's done the sort of conceptual part of it, and then we've relied on Franco and Bernadette to sort of be the on-ground experts. This is Jimin making coconut trees. Here, this was when the studio was operating out of our home. And again, the use of models for us is paramount. It's not. It's a design tool. These are not presentation devices. It's a design tool. The design evolves through that process. We look at how the landscape is. We look at how the furniture is. We look at how the door frames, windows, handrails, how all of those things work together. It's a dialogue with the people who are making it. What are their ideas about the construction technology? But it's also something that we do share with the clients, and then from there it evolves and grows. Again, this is another model at another scale. We try as best we can to make models that are expressive of the materials. So again, we used cork as a way to kind of simulate the coral. This is literally this column right there is that one. And so it just gives us more than drawings, more than anything else. It really gives us a sense of how these things will come about. So this was last week. You can see the bananas here in the foreground. The coconuts are coming up. And yeah, this is the construction process. It's a very simple, it is in a seismic area, so we had to use concrete columns, but it's exposed board form finish on top. Very simple, very crude construction. This is the team of people that were doing it. This is Simona here on the left. Silouan worked with Simona before Simona left for Zanzibar. It's been really important for us. This is true of the school, but also even more so for this project. We have 2 full-time architects who've been there every minute that the construction's been going on. So Simona's been there for about 1.5 years now. We've had 2 others go, one who's more working on the landscape now. But for us, again, trying to create that loose formwork where we can, there's an armature, there's an idea about the buildings, but that we can evolve them and we can adapt them as they grow and as they go along. And to do that, you really have to have somebody on the ground, understanding, communicating with the local team, communicating with us, communicating with the clients, and designing as we go along. You can see the landscape is evolving. There's Milena and Ariel. It must be low tide. There's Ariel again. And so the furniture looks like we're going to be able to make most of it in India. The timber locally is quite expensive and it's not a great quality. And so we're able to use the reclaimed old Burma teak wood that we get in India. It's culled from when old buildings get torn down. They save all of the timber. It's recycled. It's fantastic because it's really well seasoned. Some of it's been milled 80 to 100 years ago, and so it's incredibly stable. And so working with the clients to develop the designs for the interiors as well. This is Milena's work again. You can tell Milena has been there. All these samples that come up, and this is what happens. So one of the fun things about the resort is that the first 9 rooms. The first phase is 9 rooms, and each of the rooms is being curated by a different friend of Shehab's. So they're selecting the art, they're selecting the books, they're selecting the furniture, and even the colors for the plaster. So Milena came and developed the palette of colors, and then people will choose which ones they want in their room. This is what happens when you leave it to the architect. You get a very dull, boring gray that's made with gray pigment. And then Milena comes in and does something much more interesting. Again, we've made all the switches, the knobs, the fan dimmers, things like that. The door handles are things that we've produced in India and taken over. But again, it's really, we try and work as much as we can, as often as we can, as thoroughly as we can with the local palette and the local expertise and knowledge. And where that is not sort of what the project needs to be or what we'd like it to be, we then come in and can supplement it with some of the expertise that our team has. This is the color palette, and I wanted to show this just by coincidence. This image and this image, which looks better on the screen than it does here, but there's the subtle nuance of the colors as they change throughout the day. Again, this is the coral. The coral stone on the walls is what the whole island is made of. If you dig it in one area, you might get this kind of orangey pinky salmon. If you dig it in another area, you'll get this white. This is the same, literally the same material. And if you dig down on our site, it's more of a creamy, buttery kind of beige. So again, depending on where you take it from, you'll get a different color. This is again, very much in progress. So the what you see here is the incomplete swimming pool. You can see this is how close the edge of the cliff is. This is the pool here again. So that column you saw there was this one. This is an open dining pavilion. It'll have a rooftop terrace. Again, the idea with the project from the client side was they wanted to create a series of spaces that would be communal, that people would go there. If they knew the people they were traveling with, they could rent out 3 rooms in the same set of guest houses. If they didn't, they would have the opportunity to meet them. And so it's been set up in a way where a lot of the spaces are very open, very public, and built around this idea of community. So for Franco and Bernadette, who've since become very close friends of ours, they are working on one of the largest sustainable developments in Africa, certainly in East Africa. It's for a German developer, and they're creating this township called Fumba Town. That's their job. But as a part of that, south of that development, they were given a parcel of land. And so they want to build a home for themselves. They've made Zanzibar their adopted native place. And the idea for that was they wanted to be completely off the grid. And so it'll have there'll be a solar car park here in the back. that we're working on the technical design with a friend of Bernadette's. It will, Zanzibar, unlike India, India has 4 months of heavy monsoon. Zanzibar's is much more dispersed throughout the year. So the idea, again, the similar site, solid coral rock, very little soil, but the advantage of that is that what you're standing on is effectively bedrock. So what they want to do is they had the idea to build a cistern, and so what we've designed is a house to collect water. And so if I show this, it's also very much inspired. So these are the local village houses. These are all load-bearing coral stone with lime mortar. We're looking at something different. A friend of theirs is a environmental builder who works a lot with compressed earth blocks. So we're looking at using earth blocks to create the walls, lime mortar. The plan is to not have one speck of cement in the whole project. So again, very, very simple courtyard house. All of the water from the roof is, all 4 roofs slope into the courtyard. There's a water body in the courtyard that has an overflow that gets filtered and goes into this cistern. He also wants to have a separate part of the cistern where he can grow mushrooms, some of them regular mushrooms and some of them of a different variety, but also where he can keep cheese. And he asked me on the last trip that he's never really given up the sort of fear of East Germany, so he wanted to have a place to hide out as well. But the idea in general, again, is to have a place where there's enough water that can be stored for 3 months of use, and have the home completely off the grid. This is the other section. It's a very simple plan, which I'll come to in a minute. It's basically a courtyard with a passage, an internal passage. The idea is that we build it much the same way that the local village houses are built. Again, they want this to be a model for sustainability. They want this to be a model for other people in the region. So they want to stay within that kind of economic framework. They were very excited when I proposed cow dung flooring, which you don't get a lot of clients who get excited about that. I actually said to them, because I was expecting the question, I said, are you going to be okay that it softens when it rains? And they said, yeah, it's fine. We'll just have a party and we'll invite people and we'll redo it and it'll be fine. So they're very, very, very special people, very beautiful people. And it's a joy to be able to work with them. This is the plan. So again, entering the sea is here to the west. You enter from here. This is a kitchen. They were actually both formerly trained as chefs, so there's going to be a built-in bread oven here. They wanted a large kitchen that had a view to the sea, so this looks west through this open veranda. There's a sort of study/guest room that can be converted. This is their bedroom. He has an older son who comes to visit occasionally, so there's an extra bedroom here. And then each of the corners, if you go back to this plan, each of the corners has an outdoor shower, open courtyard, which also for me was a nice way to resolve the roof. Again, it's very simple, corrugated metal, a layer of insulation. In the bedrooms, we'll do something slightly more finished, but in the verandas, I don't know, you can't really see it in these photos, but the model has what they call fito, which are these woven sticks. So again, very, very, this is a sort of broader version of it. But again, very, very simple, very, very local. Just trying to produce something that is fundamental, that is replicable, which again was the idea for the school as well. If we were able to stay within the economic model, the idea for Avsara is that other schools could emulate that process. And so trying to work hard to stay within that framework. This is the view out to the sea. Basically, when you enter the bedroom that you saw is here on the right. This is the door to the master, and then this is the front veranda with the kitchen on the left. And that's it.